Welcome to Jill Eng Mindful Reality. Today I'm going to do an episode on the feeling of the mind thinks there's something to do. So if you flip through some of my other episodes, you will see I talk about this a lot. Excuse me. What do I mean by that? The mind thinks there's something to do. It feels like our actions come from our mind. And it's natural and a habit of the mind, or just what it does, to not only have a thread of messaging that is kind of familiar to us and based on our psychological conditioning and the way we think about things and all of that. But there's also a sense of pressure that there's something to do that isn't what we are currently doing. So my work wraps around these concepts of action and doing, which for me are basically one and the same, that there's only action occurring by our body, our organism, in the spaces that it occupies throughout a day and a lifetime. And the feeling of doing, I guess, would have to be that it's a feeling that we cause these actions through some kind of mechanism in what we call a mind that, perhaps has some kind of an inner self behind it that can drive home a desire. And I study this a lot on an awareness level, and I have an education and training in related fields. But I think it's just interesting to sort of study how we take it for granted. It's so assumed in our thinking that is not only a normal thing, but that there is an answer to be found in the mind or in our thought process that would show us how to execute an action. And in my work, I talk about how action is not what we think it is. And action is, in truth, sort of a description or a sentence that we make, if we were asked to make one, describing the status of our physical existence in the space we're occupying in any moment. So right now I'm sitting on a couch holding a phone and talking into the recorder. And that's an action, because really what else could we call an action? That's pretty much as concrete as an action gets. And everybody who is alive is in one, not only in every second or millisecond of their existence, but continually, because we never disappear from the space. And when I say the space, I just mean the planet, the existence that we occupy physically. And if we're alive, we exist physically. And these are things that we don't think about, and they're also things that, if we're going to call the thinker in us, or the place of thinking, if we're going to call it the mind, these are things that the mind is never occupying itself with in its language or messaging. So there's just not an irony, but just kind of something that escapes our thought processes. But it's integral and it's essential. And so I study this. And I write books on it, and I make YouTube episodes and do a little bit of coaching to bring people's awareness to the fact that we are always in an action. And we can see what that is if we look down at our limbs, our hands, our legs, our feet, touch our head, touch your mouth when it's talking. We know that we are there physically, even if we are dissociating intensely or lost in deep thought. We know that intellectually we're there, and if someone brings your attention to it, you can be like, oh yeah, of course, those are my feet, and they're attached to my legs, which is attached to my hips and my torso and my shoulders and arms and head and neck and all that. And so again, if you look at the body in the space and then you make a sentence, I am sitting on the chair, talking to my friend, or I am standing in the kitchen, boiling eggs or making a cup of tea, or, our actions don't actually get all that complicated, which is fascinating because our thought processes about ourselves and our lives and the lives we want, or things that have happened to us in the past, or just imaginings of ourselves in the moment, are quite fascinating. I mean, those are kind of, I don't know, they're eventful, they're glamorous, or they're, horrifying, depending on our experiences and the way we think. But in reality, an action is basically always just some kind of task, or, you're lying down and you're sleeping, or resting, or writing something, or in the bathroom, or in the shower, or reading a book, or, petting a dog, or talking to your child, or looking at the TV. I mean, it's so simple in that way. And it's concrete because our bodies never disappear from their physical existences. And that's what escapes our mind, or it's just not part of the mind, right? I don't really like the term mind because it's not referring to anything anatomical. For me, the mind is the brain. It's just a type of functioning, a type of neurological functioning that produces thoughts. And this sense of thoughts and thinking, which we can't actually touch anyway, is an inner sensation, and it comes with messaging. And I put many things under the term thought. Basically, I put any kind of inner messaging, whether it's a goal, a thought, an idea. Even the word intuition to me bubbles up as some kind of thought, a feeling, an emotion, a judgment, an opinion, a premonition, any of it. It's a type of messaging, and I call that thought. And for some reason I don't mind the word thought, but the word mind somehow is referring to some kind of place that doesn't anatomically map out onto an organism. But that's fine. Everybody knows what we mean when we say the word mind. But it's the place that it feels like thoughts emanate from, and it's a place that, depending upon who you are and what you believe in, it feels like there's a person in there, or a soul in there, or a spirit in there, or a consciousness in there, something that generates the thoughts, or experiences things, and then can somehow make our actions happen. And I argue against all of that, because for many reasons, but also for the simplicity that our actions are already in process. And it's really just about that we're not defining action as what it really is. And when I say what it really is, I mean even in the sense of how we normally think about it. Because even if it was like an investigation, a police report or a detective, well, where was he on the night of blah, 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 he was in his kitchen, with his mother talking, it's always about the actual physical thing in the end that we're referring to. But in our minds, we don't think about actions those ways. So it's very easy to see your action. It's also easy to see that your action never disappears, meaning that it's continual. And when I say easy, it's not easy to tap into the awareness, because we're always lost in thought, and habitually that's where our focus is, unless you are steeped in some kind of mindfulness practice or something. But it's easy in the sense that our physical organism, as we see it from the outside, in a mirror, or even touch it with your hands. It's a skeletal structure, and it's symmetrical, and it's always the same, barring any kind of amputation or, alterations physically like that. But you've got your head on your spine, and your ribs and your scapula, your shoulder blades, your collarbones and your hip bones and your leg bones and your feet and all that stuff. So it's always there. It's always the same. Your skeletal system is like making joints in certain places, very specific places. That's where your bones fold and bend and move. And that's how we gesture and task, through the day. And that's basically it. I mean, and so, but if you see it with your eyes or touch it, you can also sense your weight on a surface, then touch your head and realize, oh, it's always part of the rest of me, even though I'm lost in thought and I'm not particularly aware of it. You can get access to the organism in the space and realize that it never disappears, right? Until and if you pass away, it's always there. If you're alive, and you would only be having this conversation or thought if you were alive. So, the other thing that's very concrete in the way that we as humans, relate to life is the clock, right? And the second hand. And our presence in the space, not presence in the sense of being aware of yourself, but the existence of yourself in the space, and its coordination with the clock is that as the second hand is moving, and you could even stare at a clock that had a second hand and just kind of get that sense, you see that your body is, if you were making continual sentences, I'm doing this, now I'm doing this, now I'm doing this, now I'm doing this, now I'm doing this, or if there was a video camera watching you, or if somebody were painting you continually, you would realize that your body was always in space, in an action, in a specific action. And again, like whether you like it or you don't like it, that isn't the point of this episode. It's more to say that if something is already in process, which is your action, which is the only thing we really could call an action, because a thought is not an action. I mean, it's a type of physical activity in the brain, but it's not what we refer to as our actions. I'm driving a car, I'm signing a letter, I'm emailing someone, I'm texting, I'm taking out the garbage. I mean, those are the things we think of as actions. So those are the only things we could call actions, and they're continual. And you can see it for yourself. And you can also sort of grasp, if you really pay attention, that the thought process that's going on in any given moment, and especially if it's a thought of, I want to do this, I really want to do this, I really feel like I need to be doing this. And it's not to say you might not at some point in your future find yourself in that action, but in the moment you're having the thought, I wish I were doing something else, I wish I were doing such and such, you're actually always already in an action that that you can't move out of the way because that moment is already over. And this is tricky. It's like you're staring at your body in the space and you realize, oh, that second already passed, so whatever I would have called that action is over. It's of the past. And whatever I was thinking at that time, I need to be doing this, I should be doing this, there was already simultaneously a real action going on. And that's always going to be the case. So in any moment that we find ourselves like deep in thought or a feeling of pressure, I wish I were doing this, I wish I were doing such and such, or I should be doing this, there's already an action and a stream of activity going on. And I argue against any cause and effect relationship between the thought and the desire to be doing something and our actions, because action is, it's physical, it's three-dimensional, it's the body in the space, and it's fleeting, and it's basically a stream of continual bodily movement. Whereas a thought about our life, it comes in story form, and it's like pictures. Now, this is not to say, people could listen to this and think it's ridiculous. Like, well, I was thinking about how much I want to call so-and-so. I was feeling a lot of pressure to do it. And then 5 minutes later, I picked up the phone and made the phone call. So obviously that happens to us, not infrequently, but most of the time it doesn't work out that way. Most of the time there's just kind of this annoying feeling behind the scenes of not feeling good about what we are spending our time doing, or a lot of pressure about things we wish we were doing. And in the meantime, the whole time, we're already in a stream of activity, and we can notice it and let it be, because there's no way for it to not be going on. It's our existence, it's our status. And even as I'm saying this, I realize, like, if you're not familiar with my work, or you don't really subscribe to what I'm talking about, you're going to feel like the whole thing's kind of ludicrous, because, generally cultures give us the impression and the feeling inside that these thought processes we're having somehow jump out of our heads and move our bones around. And I argue against that there's just, neuromuscular functions in the brain and the nervous system that are outputting, inputting information from the environment, outputting, bone movements, and those are our actions. And then we have a story going on in our mind all the time about who we are in the world and what we wish to be doing and the pressure we feel to do things. And I think more what, perhaps sometimes happens is there's like a sense before we might do something that, we feel like I need to do this. But as I would say, because I stare at this a lot, I would say like 90% of the time, it would be easy to see that there's not really a cause and effect relationship between these two on a conscious level. And that you can rest assured that you don't have to figure out how to spend your time, because your body is already in the space doing it. And we have to let our thoughts be there. The mind is as concrete as the bones are, meaning that our thoughts are also in a stream of continual activity and messaging. And that's also, kind of happening on its own, just bubbling up, surfacing with certain stories and certain messages. But they coexist, kind of like blinking and swallowing, or just all the systems in the body. So in the same way that our circulatory system is, the word we use to describe the heart pumping blood, and circulation is going on, and respiration is going on, and hormones and glands are secreting hormones in our endocrine system, and our neuromuscular system has our bones moving. And we tend to call that last one action, because there's something about, I'm doing this, I'm doing that refers to what the bones are doing in the space. And I'm saying that, the information flowing through our mind with all these stories and preoccupations and desires and pressures and disgruntledness is just commentary from our perspective. And there's a lot of cognitive science that backs this up in terms of, a part of the brain that just makes up a story basically to describe in language, what something about the organism's life, and also the sort of as a predictor or guesser or calculator of what the organism might do. But it's all happening on a brain level, and it's behind the scenes of our conscious awareness. But what we can become aware of is what is our real action, and to see that it's already existing. And we don't have to give in emotionally to the bad feelings of feeling wrong about the way we do spend time, or the fact that we can't seem to figure out how to get or how to connect up our thoughts and actions. We can't seem to make our actions be what our thoughts and desires are. And so I would say that that's not possible It's possible. It's only possible if you end up seeing yourself doing what you hoped to do, but otherwise there is no direct cause and effect link. But you can rest assured that you're guaranteed to be in an action for your entire life, because physical existence itself is an action, because it will always make a sentence and there's always a description, and your body's always going to be on some kind of piece of furniture or standing on the ground. And anyway, I'm going to leave it at that for today. I apologize for the background noise that jumped in the middle. I thought I had timed things that my refrigerator would not start to make its noise, but that too is part of the existence of my space at the moment. And so thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to my next episode with Mindful Reality. I am Jill Eng. Thank you for being here.